by saying your name and the organization you're affiliated with.
All right, my name is William Rees. I'm a professor emeritus from the School of Community and Regional Planning at UBC in Vancouver, Canada, where I taught ecological economics and human ecology for 44 years.
So how do you talk about sustainable consumption?
Consumption is a very complex issue. People are being forced to feel guilty about it now, which is unfortunate because every living thing from green plants to the smallest microbe is a consumer. Human beings are natural consumers. We have to consume simply to survive. It's a biophysical and thermodynamic reality. So the question is, what's an appropriate level of consumption? And that's really what sustainable consumption is all about. We have to consume, but we're on a world that produces in finite quantities. Humans fool themselves into thinking we're productive in the biophysical sense. We're not. We're strictly consumer organisms. We consume in our economy the products of nature, of natural systems. And those systems, ecosystems, have a limited capacity to produce and to assimilate the necessary waste products of our consumption of the products of nature. So we have two limits to the amount that as an aggregate population humankind can consume. We have to consume no more than the rate at which natural systems produce, and we can generate wastes, the necessary byproduct of consumption, no faster than natural systems can assimilate them. So right now globally, total consumption by the human enterprise, or if you like the whole of the human family, exceeds the capacity of natural systems to produce. We know that because we're seeing massive soil erosion, land degradation, fisheries collapses, deforestation, and so on, all oriented to increasing the throughput of material for us to consume. And we see it in the form of ocean pollution. They say that within 20 years, the amount of plastics in the water, for example, will exceed the biomass of fish. Climate change, the accumulation of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, is a waste management problem. The carbon dioxide being the principal waste of most industrial societies. So we're clearly, as a species, over-consuming. On the other hand, there's a great diversity in range of consumption. We have roughly 1 billion people on Earth who don't consume enough to have an even marginally decent lifestyle. We have probably over 1 billion people who are vastly over-consuming, far beyond their fair share of what the Earth produces. In fact, if we looked at that even in dietary terms, there's 1 billion people who are clinically obese and another 1 billion who are marginally underfed or grossly underfed. So the question is, what is the level of consumption that would be adequate for most people and could be sustained by human, or rather natural production processes, and how many people would that support? So that's a huge question, and it really is up for grabs right now whether the Earth could support even the present human family at an adequate level of sustainable consumption. So for example, we know that it takes about 7 hectares of biophysically productive and assimilative landscape to support a North American. But there's only about 1.8 hectares on the planet per capita. So we use 4 or 5 times our fair share. Other people in the poorest countries in Africa use less than 1/5 of their adequate share. So there's this enormous disparity. And we talk about contraction and convergence. The only way we can reach a fair share is for the rich to consume vastly less to make the ecological space available for the poor to consume a little bit more. But even on average, we're over-consuming, and that's the real dilemma. Well, it's one of several dilemmas. I suppose the first is that people today have been trained to think they have an absolute right to consume, to be at the top of the heap, so to speak. Nobody voluntarily, at least no culture, no society, no big organization has voluntarily reduced its consumption or its income in order to make room for other people. So how are we going to design a world where the average level of consumption is adequate and sustainable, but that requires wealthy, high-end consumers to reduce their consumption by a factor of 3 or 4 in order to make space for the poor who are currently inadequately provisioned to come up to a marginally decent or decent sustainable lifestyle. And that's the crunch we're facing. I don't think there's any other way to put it.
I think that's perfect.
All right, then. Thank you.